And I'm gonna this is Hirsh and the greatsword, and I'm gonna let everybody in. Here we go. Everyone's connecting.
Excellent. Thank you, Gustav.
Most welcome.
Welcome, everyone, to Cornerstones of Greatsword. Technically, it's Cornerstones of Learning Greatsword because this isn't all the answers. It's just the fundamentals that will help you build all the right answers. I'd like to start with just a brief introduction about what kind of greatsword I like, because if you don't have a preference, by the time you get through working through the 4 cornerstones of greatsword, you will probably have a preference. My greatsword is just over 3 pounds. I use a windrose pewter scent stopper, and the center of balance is about a hand, maybe a little bit more, in front of the keons. There are 4 cornerstones to learning greatsword. The first is, quite simply, learning to walk. This camera, but if you also have the line of attack camera over here, this is my opponent. And the beautiful part about this particular lesson is you can learn this at home. You can practice this at home with or without this video. You take a horse stance perpendicular to the line of attack. You take your greatsword and you point it away from the line of attack. Then you cock your head and you look over your shoulder at your opponent. You're now standing in what's frequently called tiger tail. You do not want to be in tiger tail when you're in range, but it's a great place to start to learn to walk. From tiger tail, you take a step towards your foe, and you let your sword follow a natural arc that would connect with a target. I'll talk more about which target when you finish the step. When you take another step, you take another swing, and so on. And when you get to the 3rd step, you realize you might be getting kind of close to your target. Maybe they're running away from you. It's hard to say. You take a step back. And the fun fact about taking a step back, which you get to repeat, is that it's the same as taking a step forward. When you finish a step, you finish a shot. If I finish a step on my left foot, I finish a shot on the left side. If I take a step back with my left foot, I finish a shot on the side that has my leading foot. So when I take a step back, I finish a shot on the leading foot. When I take a step forward, I finish a shot on the leading foot. A lot of people will say, well, you might want to finish the step, then finish the shot. I say step and shot land at the same time. It lets you use your big muscles first. This is your biggest muscle. Which means you're resting your small muscles, your fine motor controls, your arms and your wrists, your fingers, those are fine motor. The other thing about learning to walk and that natural shot is that as you finish, you are generally striking at head or shoulder. We're going to move on to that and talk about the inverted J. Melkor, could you join me close to in front of the map, the line of attack cam? So Melkor, one other piece of advice. Wear your gauntlets when you're practicing greatsword, because somebody will change their mind, and instead of stopping, your opponent may push out to block, and it's going to hurt a lot if you don't have gauntlets on. I know a lot of people who will say, oh, you know, as long as you do it with somebody you trust, it's fine, and that's true. And you're wrong. So the nice part, Melkor knows that I'm not going to hit him. So he's going to take his greatsword and just stand here like this, like a pell, but with all the accoutrements. When I finish a step and I finish a shot, it's going to be somewhere between the point of the shoulder and the top of his head. When I take another step, I'm in the same arc on the opposite side. I take a step with my left foot, I finish with the leading foot, that's the side it's on. The nice part about this is when I step back, I'm over there. When I step back, I'm over there. When I step, just cross it up. So as you can tell, you can cross this up. If I decide I don't have time for a step and I want to hit over here, I can do that. I just don't get my biggest muscle. You want to use your biggest muscles first as much as the other things I choose is to hit somebody at the point of the shoulders. And this is what brings me to the second, that inverted J. If I'm going to hit somebody outside that arc where all my natural shots so far have been in here and in here in this natural arc, if I want to hit somebody outside of there, quiz time, I'm going to hope for somebody to speak up. What's the first thing you notice when I take my guard? Hands. It's hands. My right hand is on top. If I am going to swing outside of this, I call this right hand lead. People call it different things. I call it right hand lead. I'm probably going to swing on this side that has my leading hand. Why? Because it's easier. I can hit an inch above the knee. I can hit a hip. I can hit arm. All over here to this point pretty easily. And anybody who's practicing at home or has heard this lesson before recognizes that if I go outside the inverted J, my arms are crossed, my mechanics are poor, I don't have nearly as much follow through here. Are there ways to hit outside the inverted J? Absolutely. Have I done it? Yes. Where do I hit most of the time? Right in here, in that inverted J. However, I usually fight left hand lead, which means my inverted J on my opponent is right over here. This side, all the way over to here. The beautiful part about the inverted J is, if you're thinking offensively, you're like, well, I want to really be on the alert for shots over here because it's much easier to hit there and to make the next block. It's much easier to strike with I'm taking a higher risk shot, a higher risk to me personally. If you're thinking defensively, you can do the same thing as long as you notice what hand I'm leading with. If you don't pay attention to what hand I have and you take the exact same stance, whether I'm right hand or left hand lead, then you are giving me an advantage because you're not prepared to defend against the most likely places that I'm going to strike. That's the inverted J. Pick up the greatsword, Melkor. So this brings us to the third cornerstone of learning greatsword. This piece comes from Sir Roger de Bayeux, one of my favorite people ever. And I took a rush class from Sir Roger back when rush classes it was Great Weapons 101. And he teaches the same fundamentals class, whether you have a greatsword or a pole arm, and he specifically teaches it with 6 foot. We're not going to talk about 7.5. We're specifically going to talk about greatsword. But this element, this entire cornerstone is straight from Sir Roger. And the essence of this is, I'm going to take a left-hand lead like Melkor. The essence is, if I'm swinging at Melkor, the safest thing for him to do is to meet my blade perpendicular, because it has the highest certainty, the highest likelihood of blocking this, and the least likelihood of me changing something at the last minute and getting past his shot. One of the other aspects of Sir Roger's class is, quite simply put, as soon as you swing, you have to return. It's now the defender's swing. And I want to meet his perpendicular because it gives a great confidence that I'm going to block that shot. Now, Melkor is going to return much more slowly because I asked him to for this particular section of class. What I really want to do as an attacker is to choose hold still, to choose one side of his blade to either attack on this side or to attack on this side. And the main thing you want to notice on that is I'm coming in parallel, because to hit him, I need to get past his blade, and that means I need to think parallel when I'm thinking offensively. But the fact is, I just blocked his shot, and as soon as I move, he's going to move. So he's going to try to catch my blade, maybe 100% perpendicular, or at least keep it between his body and my sword. Therein lies the fundamental that exchange. As soon as I throw a shot, it doesn't matter whether it's an in-close shot or if it's a shot at extreme range, full extension. As soon as I'm out here, it's his turn to decide if he wants to throw a shot while I am coming back to make a block and to be loading for another shot. One piece that really I didn't talk about in parallel and perpendicular is the thing I already talked about in the inverted J. If Melkor has left hand lead and I have right hand lead, we begin closer to parallel. So if I come in this way or this way, we're more naturally parallel. If we both start at the same hand, we're sort of naturally perpendicular. And you've seen a lot of people that go to a fighter practice where everybody fights the same hand. Everybody fights right hand. Perpendicular, block, 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 turns into, sometimes looks not very pretty. It's like a slugfest. And everybody is so naturally perpendicular, it's really hard to make an opening to get that parallel shot. And it's not the prettiest greatsword. As soon as one person, go ahead and switch, switches and you're more naturally parallel, we might look like we have the same hand, but the movements you have to take to make the block are bigger. And the same principle I mentioned before pertains. You want to keep, on the defense, you want to keep your blade between your body and your opponent's blade. Even if you don't make it to perfectly perpendicular, that's going to keep you safe. That's the third cornerstone, parallel and perpendicular. The fourth cornerstone is my favorite. It's circles. And when we go back to Tiger Tail to start, you get the biggest circle out there. You get a big step, and you finish it. That's only about a 180-degree arc, but that's a big circle. And if I wanted to throw another big circle on the other side, I could wind up and throw opposite side. I could even drop one low. Unless if I do it over here, I'm at risk because he's just going to crush me. It's really hard to make the recovery from that because I'm outside the J. That's the big circles. Always want to start with big circles to learn them. If you start with small circles, then all you ever learn are the small circles. And somebody who can change it up and get a big circle is going to have opportunities that the person who only ever learned small circles just doesn't have. They don't have that shot. The thing about big circles is they reinforce what I said in the first cornerstone about learning to walk. Use your big muscles first. Even if you're keeping the sword in close, the big circles that come out wide leverage your gluteus maximus and your hips first so that your arms can change something up. And that's where we come to not just the small circles, but changing from big circles to small circles. So if I tighten this up, then suddenly I have moved from a big circle that could come over to here to a big circle that comes in close. And when I tighten that up, not only do I change my line of attack, but I can choose to come in parallel just past the block, or I can choose to tighten it up enough that if he bought the big circle, I can come in parallel behind. And that change up between big and small is truly the fourth fundamental, the fourth cornerstone. As you look at each of those things, each cornerstone teaches you other things about the other cornerstones. You can make a circuit through all four of those cornerstones, work on each element, and as you get to the next one, you're going to realize it's teaching you something about the cornerstone you just practiced. or maybe the one before that, any of the four. They're all connected. The circles connect those. That is the essence of what I wanted to talk about with cornerstones of learning greatsword. I'm going to look at the chat, and people can speak up if you have questions.
So for the chat room, this is the time if you have questions or comments to go ahead and put those in there.
I also put a link in the chat that's a link to my outline. One thing I forgot to talk about big circles, about circles in general. If you think about the point of my sword as what traces the circle, and I take a big circle or another big circle, that's fine. You can think about those circles, but really anybody who is in the least bit nitpicky is going to say that's not really a circle, it's just an arc. Well, if I go from here all the way around, it might be a circle. But realistically, if you like geometry, you can also think of it as cones. And this one is a section of a big circle. That in particular helps you to think about how you're getting from one place to the other. I talked about tracing a circle with the point, but I used to teach physics, so I can't leave this part out. When you build a greatsword, find the center of mass. You might even want to put a little piece of tape or a little mark on it so you can see it when you're practicing. Probably not when you're fighting. If you're looking at your own sword when you're fighting, you need more practice. But this center of mass is actually, from a physics perspective, what you're doing work on. When I move in a big circle, this arc is the thing that moves. When I move in a small circle, that arc, that center of mass, is where I'm applying work to make the entire sword move. Question time. I love question time.
All right. So Logan asks, do you hide behind a tree or do you try and meet the attack?
All of them. The principle I provided was you want your sword between their sword and your body, but the absolute best option is not to meet it perpendicular. Melkor, can you swing at me? But to make your opponent miss gives you a greater opportunity. If Melkor swings at me here and I block it perpendicular, that's great. Take the exact same swing. If Melkor swings there and I step out and swing here, suddenly he's swinging past me with no resistance and I have a bigger opening. So if I can make him miss either by moving out of the way of his sword, or if he's taking a more vertical shot, letting it slide down, maybe off, then I have a greater opportunity. And Logan, I hope that's close to what you're asking about.
Okay. So the next one is, I would like to hear more about stance and posture.
Okay. So I talked about taking steps. I didn't talk about guards. A lot of people take a straight up, here's the box. I'm going to block everything with keeping my hands and the majority of the greatsword in the box and keep the shots flowing in there. Those are fairly fundamental. I believe that the best opportunities flow one to the other. And while the principles of keep your sword between your opponent's sword and your body, and stay in the box and you'll be safe, are viable principles to deviate in order to get other opportunities. Other things about stance, I could talk about grip, but that one's kind of boring. Was that Your Majesty? Was that Lucian?
I believe it
Let me
was.
know if you have a follow-up on that.
Yeah, that was me. I'm happy. That's a great answer.
Okay. So last week we learned about footwork. How does what we learned last week translate with greatsword?
Well, I'm going to refer back to use your big muscles first. Everything that people talk about with footwork, with sword and shield, is the same with greatsword, except instead of sword and shield, I've got a greatsword. So if I want to throw a good shot with the least amount of effort, I'm going to take, when I do this, that's where the power from. I'm not going to throw a shot when I'm in midair, and I'm going to try to avoid finishing a shot when I'm in mid-step. I want to finish when my base is here, and if I can sit into it a little bit, then that makes it even easier. Although, greatsword is the easiest weapon to hit too hard with, so don't. When I say use your big muscles first, it means you need to keep your fine motor control in reserve for one of two things. Changing the shot if it winds up, maybe you're swinging a little too hard, but you can also change the targeting. One of my favorite targeting, Reinhardt, could you take just one step towards me? Come out this way. One of my favorite fine motor control things to talk about is, and this is exactly the same, this isn't footwork per se. I've deviated greatly from the question. Throw a shot right here. Or if I throw a leg shot 1 inch above the knee, perfect shot. Well, that may actually be easy to block. But if they miss the block and their whole hip is open, all I have to do is rotate my wrist. Fine motor control. You look at one change, a small change to the wrist, and I get about 8 to 10 inches of travel with the tip. So this shot with no wrist change turns into this shot. Guess what? Hip is a kill. And that is what fine motor control is for, in particular with greatsword. I would say there's more similarities with footwork to sword and shield and greatsword than there are differences, but there are some differences. You only have one thing.
Okay, so the next question is thoughts on half swording with greatsword in SCA combat.
I think it's a lot of fun, and I'm not really very good at it. You should probably consult someone who's actually studied it. And then now that I've said that, I'll give my opinions. First of all, I'm going to reference Sir Roger again, and that is, when you're in range, don't change your grip. If your opponent is paying attention, step into the camera. If your opponent is paying attention, I'm in here and I decide I want a half sword, the first thing he does when I let go is hit my sword. And I'm so worried about grabbing my sword that he probably is hitting me after he's got me all worried about getting a hold of my sword. So my biggest advice on half swording is change your grip out of range. Then you can come in and use it. But remember, as soon as you're half swording, you've just given a range advantage to your opponent. Half sword, especially if you're up in the tails and for leg shots, might be great. Maybe you like it against sword and shield. I like a lot of techniques against sword and shield. So it can improve your turnaround. It can reduce the amount of time between blocking a shot and swinging, but it also dramatically reduces your range. And oh, this is the perfect time. I have a provable fact, an opinion that is provable about why greatsword is the best melee weapon. Mathematically provable fact. And that is quite simply that it has the most linear inches of striking surface of any weapon on the field, except the 7.5-foot pole arm dressed as a greatsword, the faux pole arm, which again proves my point that greatsword is mathematically the best weapon for hitting at all ranges. Hitting people blind, just not best at that, but I like fitting that in.
Okay. The next question is, do you have a center of balance preference, or do you feel that is up to the fighter, style, etc.?
I absolutely have a center of balance preference. This is about one gauntlet hand in front of my keons. My keons are a little less than 18 inches because I don't really need that much leverage if I'm doing my mechanics right. And so for that, that's my preference. If you don't have a preference yet, you're welcome to try mine. And as soon as you do have a preference, go with it. I know people who don't like a counterweight. I really like having a counterweight because I like to center balance right about here instead of centered. So do you see on that, closer to your hands is better? The one thing I would say is if you get it too close, it's not good. There's a reason when you pick up a hammer that the hammer head is not immediately at the edge of your hand. So it's interesting to note that this distance here to the center of mass is almost the same as most hammers you will buy in a hardware store. And guess what? If you had to count the number of times I fought greatsword one-handed because I lost an arm, it would not be a low number. I lose an arm a lot. And having the center of mass closer to the keons makes that, I'm going to call it manageable. It doesn't make it easy, but it makes it manageable.
So we got a follow-up question as along those lines, what about grip length?
So when I started, the maximum grip length was 18 inches. And I've always taped my swords this way because when I started doing it, since it wasn't marked as a blade, I could hold on to it that way until this was way before half swording rules. I would like to fight, inverted greatsword and sword would be kind of fun. And then people got picky about that, so I stopped doing that. But I kept my grip length about 16 or 17 inches the entire time I've fought greatsword. That's my preference. And with the half swording rules, if I want to come out to here, that's fine. So I know that you can build your keons wherever you want. They've essentially, with the half sorting rules, effectively done away with any restriction on where you put your keons. I still like mine here. Less than 24. Maybe 20. Anything past 18 inches is odd to me, fine for you. This is a good time. So think of more questions.
We're going to have ourselves a little intermission.
We have a minimum of 2 passes per person. What?
You were wearing your glasses when you were
Glasses.
I forgot I had them on.
This is a fighter practice, so do you guys have a cup?
Yep. We're all dressed to kill. I realize this is also a good time for me to talk about. I realize that in these times it's very difficult to have fighter practice with these two fearedmen. These two fearedmen live in my house. Reinhardt, it is a pleasure to meet you on the field of honor. Very nice pass, Reinhardt. Melkor, it is a pleasure to cross swords with you again.
It has been far too long.
It has. Go! Yep. Just enough. Very well done. No, neither of those, by the way. Yeah. Not quite. Not quite on mine either. Oh, yeah, you got me. Okay. I wasn't sure if the follow through was a little weird. It slid off a little. It was good. Yeah. Excellent pass. I almost pulled it at the end because I thought you were going to duck out of it. No, you got me. I was like, I have a Reinhardt, I think that that last pass really characterized how coming in parallel gives you opportunities to strike your opponent. Let's see if there's more questions.
So the next question is, how heavy do you make your swords?
I anticipated this question. This sword is just over 3 pounds. I weighed it about an hour ago to make sure I knew. The original, I think. I used to make them about 3.5 pounds. I guess, as I get older and lazier, 3 pounds covers it.
So we're on the laptop microphone now, so they can hear us.
So I have a question, and mainly just because I was watching the three of you, and you, Hirsch, I noticed you seem to be very much with your, I guess, from last week, Brownos commented about keeping your center of balance, keeping everything kind of upright. I noticed when you fight, you're very much centered, whereas your Feardmen there are a little bit wilder. So is that something that you recommend, is trying to keep your balance centered?
Yes, mostly. I spent years believing that big step or that little extra lean was going to get me the shot. And then after more than a decade of denying the truth, I slowly came to realize that mostly when I did something that was a bigger move and leaned forward, or if I really leaned back out of a shot instead of taking a small step and staying mostly centered, those big leans, sometimes they work, usually they don't. Often they get me killed, or they leave me in such a state that I have managed to avoid the shot, but my recovery leaves me open for much longer. And by recovery, I mean back to my center of mass, or the shot that I throw goes from being this, beautiful, oh, I'm off balance, but there's a target, goes from a beautiful shot in my mind to becoming this wobbly, desperate, I might finish the shot and I might lose my balance, so I better take a step. And it leads to poor mechanics, really. So I do recommend keeping your center of mass over your feet mostly, and deviating from that, varying with a big lean or a big step, or a lean back out of range. Rarely. I don't want to say never, because all sorts of things that are a bad idea can pay off rarely.
So I would comment that the reason that I lean more than my dad is because I have a sloppier defense. And so I sometimes lean to bail out of a shot that should hit me. And it's not the best solution, but it's because I've got a sloppier defense, in my opinion.
And I don't know that I'm definitely not leaning as much as Reinhardt, because I am a much shorter person and leaning does not do nearly as much for me. But I squat down a lot more than both of these guys do, because I'm already low to the ground. Sometimes being lower to the ground gets me that advantage. That just sort of being up and centered doesn't get me. But being down here, I can duck a shot easily. I can get that hip by jaying up into it a little easier.
Yeah, you make that work way better than I do.
There is the Guardians of Valor that I won. There's a video of my first fight against Dad, Duke Dad, where I duck out of a shot just at the range by dipping down, and the way the circle works, it brushes right past my face. And that was when seeing that video, I was like, that's why I do that. Because I was like, I squat down a lot during greatsword, just sort of naturally. I didn't know why until I saw that video.
And it's a real gamble. When you choose not to block a shot, but to duck it, it's a gamble, because if your opponent realizes what you're doing and can adjust, they might still be able to hit you.
Also,
but it's so fantastic when it works.
The fifth cornerstone of greatsword is don't block with your hand. I'm bleeding a little bit.
Block between the hands, though.
Between the hands is fine. Don't block with your hand. Dangerous game.
It's a really good topic.
So I know for me, the J shot is one of my favorite shots. I mean, it's kind of the base, I guess, going from low to high J shot. What are some different examples of the J shot that you like?
I am a big fan of that scoop shot where you come down under and bring it up, that J. That's the one I throw the most, where I stand up into it.
I really like the lower rib.
Oh, yeah. The bringing the sword up over the top of your head, and that J.
So I already described my favorite is the change your wrist, change the target. Going from a leg to a kill is a beautiful thing. It can also help you to get beneath the point of a shield. If somebody has a shield, you can dig under it without coming all the way down here and sort of giving up your game that you're cutting the grass and coming up for this angle, which really tips them off. If you just drop it a little further than you could and bring it up, it is very dangerous, because if you don't bring it up, you've just hit your opponent low with the greatsword, where they're not required to wear armor. So be careful not to do that. That's why I recommend, when I teach that, I teach about turn the leg shot into a hip, or the maybe a hip into a body is one of my favorites. I think my absolute favorite is the block while striking. If I come in here and I swing for a body, I may not get the shot on the body, but my hands are right here, and I can vary where the shot lands a little, and I can vary where my hands are depending on what my opponent does. If he takes a headshot, I can block that headshot and finish the greatsword shot. And quite frankly, with a two-handed weapon, striking while blocking or blocking while striking is absolutely one of the most challenging things to do. When I talk about the fundamentals, I'm talking about building on those things. And in no way should you say, oh, I don't want to try the most advanced stuff first. Just expect to screw it up for longer. But if you don't start working on some of the harder things sooner, then you won't get there. So stick to the principles, finish the shot with a step, use your big muscles first, put your hip into it, and pay attention to your recovery. Try to come in parallel instead of perpendicular, and pay attention to your circles. So all four of those cornerstones invest the answer to this J shot that I like. The other thing that Melkor mentioned was block between your hands.
Don't block with your hands.
This is one of my favorite Shodden stories.
Uh-oh.
So
Can I have a gauntlet on for that?
no, because you're swinging at me.
Okay.
I should have a second gauntlet.
No, let's move this way so we're actually both in frame. There we go.
I don't know where to put my second gauntlet. So, okay, we're both in frame. Take a right-hand guard so that you get a really super slow shot at my leg. So when you take that shot at my leg, slow down, I can come down and I can block sort of blindly. And I might catch it on this hand, on a gauntlet. I might even catch it all the way down here. I can knock it down here or try to catch it with a key on. If I put my key on right there and I'm on top of his sword, I'm in charge. He's not going to hit my leg through the key on. But the really beautiful thing to do with that shot is to catch it between my hands. And when my knight Shodden told me, try to catch the blow between your hands, I laughed and said, oh, right, thinking he was joking. And he was dead serious. Because when you catch that blow here, you do two really powerful things. First of all, you save your hands. You don't
bleed from the thumb.
Have a little bit of concussion. And if you use your hands for work like I do, maybe you want your hands to keep working your entire life. But second, if you think about the big circles, you just caught this energy. And so you stop this shot here, and that energy has started your sword moving. You can take that energy and turn it into a circle. And I have done that enough times to tell you that, A, it works. You don't always catch it between your hands. But when you do, you get better energy transfer to your sword. And you can use that energy to speed up your shot and have a good shot that lands sooner with less work from your own muscles. That's my favorite shot.
So I switched to the computer microphone so that we could all talk. Did everybody hear all that?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And we're good. More questions.
So, how do you feel about using a fair amount of false edge shots?
I'm fine with it. Backblade is an advanced topic. If you look up some beautiful German manuals, you will see some stances, some guards that begin like this. Point down. And I'm going to characterize this as a variation on tiger tail. This is a little bit of a, I know what I'm doing, you go ahead and attack, and you're good luck getting past this. There's a little bit of ego in starting out with a downward point, because you've given up one of the easiest ways to get a good shot, which is to use gravity. So you have to put more work into this shot. The really beautiful part, Melkor, I'm going to use you again. If you take a shot at my head, nice and slow, and I come up and I block here, I have just pulled his sword past, and I'm cocked for the throw. So not only have I brought his sword out of a block, where if I blocked with the front edge, bring the shot in. If I block here, he's still very defensive. He's got his sword between me and him. He's got his sword in a good position to block almost anything. Leave it right there. If I come out of here, shot with the back blade, I'm pushing him faster out of the way, giving him extra energy, getting his sword offline, and I'm cocking my sword for a shot. So I am wind up, throwing his blade out of the way, and winding myself up for the follow-up shot that comes even faster than almost anything you can block with the front edge. The downside of that, I mess up my timing, and I just get hit. Bonk. Or I come up to here, and he hits under, if you've seen it. And so it is very difficult to get the timing just right on backblade stuff.
You're also exposing the weak part of your grip.
True, the weak part of your grip. Up here, I'm going to reference Sato because he has some really beautiful backblade stuff. We don't see that much anymore. But when you start doing some of these, bang, 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 and then he changes it up, stay right up there. If I can get Melkor to swallow way over here and pretend he's really slow on the returns, I can take a small step, make sure I don't get locked up in the peons, and hit him with the back blade inside of his return. But I have to beat him there. And if I miss, if he ducks this and goes squat, I'm toast. So there's some really elegant back blade work you can do. Absolutely high risk.
I would equate that to a similar backblade shot with sword and shield. And in fact, a lot of backblade shots with sword and shield, where if you miss, you're completely out of position and your opponent now owns you.
Not wrong, but with sword and shield, you still have a shield. With greatsword, you have one thing.
All right, so the next question here is, what do you do with greatsword fighters that are predominantly counter punchers?
Same thing I do with bastard sword fighters or 54-inch greatsword fighters, or people that bring themselves as much counter punch advantage and repost style, which is try to get them going. Honestly, I fight a little more conservatively against somebody that has a shorter sword. When I go to a foreign kingdom and there's a lot of people with 52 or 54-inch greatswords, I'm probably going to be just a little more conservative. Honestly, I'm going to try to get 2, 3, 4 shots deep into the engagement before I really commit to a shot, because if I overcommit too early, the counterpuncher is very ready. But when you look at the 4 cornerstones of greatsword, stepping with the shot, using your big muscles first, and the circles, when you get into the flow of the fight, then the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh shot of the fight all just flow one after the other. Whereas somebody who's really a counterpuncher may be ready to block and throw one, or block and throw 1, 2. But if all they do is counterpunch, then they're not going to have as much depth in getting into the flow of the fight. And that's where I usually find my advantages. I actually Googled McPherson. When he and I both lived in Shadowdale and went to fighter practice really regularly, I consider him to be instrumental in teaching me not to try to snipe that outside shot. Didn't matter if we had both 6-foot greatswords or if he had a bastard sword, I would try to snipe him with a shot and he would block it and kill me repeatedly.
You used to do that to me all the time. It was the most frustrating thing.
And it's essentially the lesson of, can you really snipe that? And the answer is the same as it is with almost every weapon system. You hardly ever are able to snipe somebody on that first shot. Sometimes you can. There's several factors that lead into that. Recognizing those helps make you a better fighter. But recognizing that usually you can't kill somebody with the first shot, that absolutely makes you a better fighter.
So I would also comment that the nature of sniping with a greatsword drastically changes the way that the range game works. Because Melkor, who is significantly shorter than me and my father, really does not have a range problem against the two of us, because the range game in greatsword is that much different than pretty much any other weapon system, I would say.
Like, take a step back. Put your greatsword at range. Like, you can slide your hand down a little bit.
They're the same. I mean, I'm fully extended with my leading hand, and we're at essentially the same range. We can hit each other in the breastbone. Neither one of us has more than 3/4 of an inch advantage, which is why it comes into timing. And sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I want to lean for that, but only if I have the chance to lean back before he's there.
Right, and that was the point that I'm trying to make, is that you do technically have a minor range advantage against Melkor, but if you try to exercise that range advantage, you're putting yourself at serious risk.
Absolutely. And that's how I feel every time I fight greatsword versus a bastard sword. I've had people say, oh, well, why don't you speak of a bastard sword? I'm like, well, I prefer greatsword. Well, don't you think they have an advantage? I'm like, do they think they have an advantage? I'm perfectly comfortable fighting greatsword against bastard sword. Against certain people, very challenging. I do like both weapon systems, but I also very much believe that if you're going to really focus on learning one first, learn greatsword. Learning bastard sword after learning greatsword is easier than learning greatsword after learning bastard sword. It's like the big circles to small circles principle. That's my opinion. I'm sure it's worked for plenty of people that they learned greatsword after bastard sword. What else do we have? I'm enjoying these questions. Thanks everybody for coming.
So you brought up bastard swords. So what are some things that you, I guess, when you approach someone who's armed with the bastard sword, what are some differences in maybe how you move or how you approach the fight?
I think the most important thing for me to do when I am facing somebody that, just whether they have a counterweight or not, somebody with a shorter weapon is going to have a slightly higher rate of fire. So their block to strike is going to be faster. So the very best thing for me to do is to accept that. If I assume that I'm going to get one free shot on them, what that probably means is that when I take my one, quote, air quotes, yeah, thank you. When I take my one free shot at them and I'm out of a bastard sword range, they're not just blocking it. They're taking a half step towards me when they block it. Then they're in range and I'm still recovering for a block.
Here, we can do this with an actual bastard sword. Thank you, Reinhardt,
for doing this to make this actually like physically
possible. One of the best things to do with a bastard sword fighter, I'm going to refer back to my earlier comment about the flow of the fight. If I just treat it like we both have two-handed swords, I'm going to swing, he's going to block, he's going to swing, and I'm going to block, and we're going to fight, then it's going to be a hard fight. He might have a little bit of a rate advantage on me, so I'm going to have to be good on my blocks, and I'm going to have to not overextend on my repos. But as soon as I can get a shot and a block and a step, if I can step back out of range, if I can freeze his feet for 1 second, if I can get the block and make my block on a leave, then I get a free shot when I'm on my way back. I am growing the range when I throw my range shot. Then I can do whatever I want because I'm increasing the range when I'm finishing my shot. As long as I'm accelerating first, I have a safe shot at range. If I try to take that safe shot at range on the close, there's no way. That just doesn't work. And accepting that and just having a fight and trying for that shot on the exit, absolutely worth it. It's worth waiting for. And if you can't make it 3-4 shots into a fight to wait for that opening, well, keep working on your fundamentals. It's what we came here for.
All right. So the next question is, when you consider flow of a fight, when do you try to slow down the pace or when do you speed up the tempo?
I really don't have an answer to when I try to slow down the fight.
He doesn't understand rhythm.
I will intentionally choose a slower tempo with some fighters to start, and I will let the flow of the fight dictate when it speeds up. Big circles, to small circles speeds up the tempo. Small to big is hard, so I'm probably only going to do that if I'm stepping out of range. Or if I'm in a position where I'm pretty darn safe because of everything that's led up to there, and it's effectively the same as getting out of range.
I have a thought on this. The flow and speed and tempo of the fight are going to naturally increase as the distance between the fighters closes. Because when you're further out, you've got these bigger circles that take more time. But when you're closer in, you can't really do those big circles as much. So you might have to use these small circles, so things are going to move a little bit faster as you close in.
Absolutely true. Very good point. There is one specific thing I was considering teaching. It's kind of an advanced technique, and I need somebody to stand with a greatsword because I'm going to teach how to throw the double tap. We covered all the basics, all the pieces. Those of you who have the outline there, you can grab a highlighter and you can find one or more elements from each of the 4 cornerstones that I'm going to talk through when I talk about how do you throw a double tap with a greatsword. It's like, well, you don't. It's long. You already said when you're talking about Siraj, you have to take turns. You have to swing and return and block. Well, guess what? You don't have to do that. You can throw a double tap, and I actually teach a double tap with a single sword the exact same way I teach double tap with a greatsword. We talked about using your big muscles first. We talked about how it's pretty easy to hit too hard with a greatsword. When you first teach somebody who's brand new how to swing a sword, you're teaching them how to use all their muscles, whether they take a step or not. And if they have any skill, within 3 to 6 months, you're teaching them, you're making sure that they know not to hit too hard, because it's not too difficult to teach somebody to use all their muscles in conjunction. How does that pertain to a double tap? Think about dancers and isolation. If I use my big muscles first, and I take a step with the shot, this uses almost 0 upper body and elbows. So I add one thing to this. I add a little curl, and instead of the step, I get just a little circle with my hip. So the first shot lands, whether it's from here or whether it's from Tiger Tail, the first shot lands, kaboom, with almost no. I really cheated. I put upper body on that just to make you react right now. I'm sorry.
Shouldn't do that.
I should.
You should give me some warning, man. I'm out with a helmet.
Okay, so block strong, okay? So the first shot lands. That's a good shot. And I put almost no arm in that. The second shot, I draw it back, but only a little bit. I don't draw it straight back and come back in, because that means changing the direction twice. Pulling it back, he already stopped it with a block. If I pull it straight back, I have to stop it and start it. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do a small circle. So after I finish the first shot, lands here, small circle, and the upper body coils and expresses. I use mostly upper body on the second one. Just a little bit of hip movement for that small circle gives a little bit of the big muscles. But essentially, you're throwing 2 shots in quick succession. The first one is almost all gluteus, and the second one is almost all shoulders. That's how you throw a double tap. It's how I throw a double tap with a single sword.
You can keep throwing it too. I've been beaten down by someone throwing the same shot over and over again, although I'm not proud to admit it.
I'll treat you. So
That's how you get me.
is it an advanced technique? Absolutely. Does it follow naturally from the 4 cornerstones? Yeah. Can you reverse that and throw upper body first, then take the step that lends the second shot more power? Yeah, you can reverse them. Practice it.
You're going to ask.
So the next question is, how do you deal with fighters that are being brawly and very close ranged?
Push him.
That's it. So I quit playing tackle football after 9th grade because I had more fun and more injuries than all the years before that. And I really didn't have enough fun to justify the injuries. So when somebody gets in close, I have a visceral tendency. Somebody comes in close, I get low, I get underneath them. I don't get them. I want to meet force with force until such time as I have a better option. If he pushes me a little and I have to step, I want not just to step back. I want to step to an angle. Maybe I want to fake him up. Maybe I'm going to say our wrists and Keon's, we're having a big wrist and Keon fight. Maybe I'm going to disengage, but instead of just pulling back, I'm going to elbow. Maybe it's a gauntlet, maybe it's a pommel, maybe it's an elbow. And as long as I don't hit my foe with that elbow, there's a lot of people who don't talk about elbows with greatsword. It's absolutely part of it's positive contact. If we're already right here, we have positive contact. We didn't hit, we made contact, and now we're vying for position. So I can use my elbow here, or I can use my elbow here and go for an angle. As long as I don't elbow my foe in the helm or even in the arm, it's part of positioning in close. I also like to recognize when somebody is just not going to budge and choose something different. I was fighting a big guy repeatedly, and I had a really big guy with a big shield because he moved here from offshore, and I had a really hard time getting around his shield. And finally, I realized that as long as I could stop him, get him to stop coming at me and block whatever he threw, I had a pretty big moment where I could take a pretty big step that he couldn't see around his big shield, and I could make the angle. So when I face somebody that I'm just not going to make a move, I might be able to stop him, might be able to influence a little, but maybe I should look for other ways to get a target. Good question.
That was I was going to say passing maneuvers.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody's being up close and brawly. Passing maneuver. You can step past them and stay rather defensive. And if they're really pushing at you, you just have their entire spine up to your whims.
Yeah.
Do with it as you will. As a dog.
Hello, Archimedes. They also sometimes, and there's a number of different very small flaws you can exploit. I'm not saying that everybody who's big or prefers the brawly maneuvers will do this, but some of them will fall for your sword. So you can position yourself for the passing move with your feet moving to prepare. And if Melkor is the brawly guy and he's baking my sword, I can leave the sword over here and beat a big move that gets me started on the passing move where his, if I can time it just right, then his momentum is straight at me.
I was going to say, you're passing a little early.
Yeah, straight at me, straight at my sword. Suddenly, he wanted this up close and personal. And as long as I can evade that, he's going to be surprised and just a little off balance that I didn't give him this target because I made every body language signal. And I'm going to meet that charge. And then step aside. As long as I don't mess it up and he steps on my ankle and injures me, that would be terrible.
So I don't think we had any other questions. Logan made the comment that greatsword is a mass weapon, always use circles, which
Absolutely. I love the hip shot because mass weapon kills on the hip. I've really enjoyed this, everybody. Any other questions? I'm happy to elaborate. You can tell I love teaching greatsword, talking about greatsword, fighting greatsword. It's fantastic.
I miss fighting greatsword.
See if we can't get that outline back. Nope. Okay. Never mind. Usually I can recall the last message sent.
I sent it.
Yeah, but not everybody's here.
So I don't see any other any other questions. We're coming up to the end of the hour. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I want to say thank you, Hirsh and Melkor and Reinhardt, for your assistance. I really appreciate it. And Logan, if you could maybe pop on real quick and explain next week's class.
Sure. Master Ravaz and I are teaching a class next week of Listen to the Old Guys. Ravaz is going to be teaching stretching. He's going to demonstrate the various stretching exercises that we should be doing before practice and before tournaments and before melees. and I will be demonstrating some of the basics that I teach people that we should all be doing on a regular basis to help us with our power generation and our footwork, and just some really basic things you can do at home with minimal equipment to help keep yourself ready for when we get out of this pandemic. There will be, this is a class where for the most part we want you to do it along with us. So wear comfortable clothes, wear things you can stretch in, and if you want to start in your armor so you're stretching just as you would before fighting, that's fine. If you would rather wear something that's a little more flexible than your armor, that's fine too. We look forward to doing it. I am going to have a ladder like His Grace Branosh talked about, and I will have a link for where you can get one if you want to, posted in the notes for the video and in the chat. And if anybody wants to know about it before then, I'll put it out on the Kingdom list, and somebody who actually is on Facebook can put it on the Facebook group. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you. All right.
Fantastic.
All right. And so I will turn this back over to Gustav.
Thank you, Your Grace. Great class.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. This session was recorded, and we'll have it out for distribution momentarily. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.